The things I wish I had known about money at 50 are not the things most people expect when they hear a sentence like that. They are not investment tips. They are not tax strategies or product recommendations or specific actions I wish I had taken earlier. The things I wish I had known are more fundamental than any of those, and in some ways more difficult to communicate because they are not facts. They are understandings. And the difference between a fact about money and an understanding of money is the difference between knowing a language and being able to speak it. My name is Richard Harlow, and I want to share with you what I believe is the most important category of financial knowledge, the category that almost nobody teaches explicitly and that almost everyone learns only through the expensive, slow, irreversible process of living its absence. This is the category I call the grammar of money. Not the vocabulary, the words, the products, the instruments. The grammar. The invisible rules that govern how financial decisions actually produce outcomes. The syntax underneath the choices that most people never see because they are focused on the choices themselves, rather than the structure that gives those choices their consequences. When I was 50 years old, I knew a great deal about money in the vocabulary sense. I understood how various financial products worked. I could read a balance sheet. I had spent decades in proximity to sophisticated financial thinking and had absorbed a substantial amount of it. But my understanding of the grammar was poor. I made financial decisions that were individually reasonable and collectively suboptimal, not because any single decision was wrong on its own terms, but because I did not understand the rules that governed how decisions in sequence produce outcomes over time. I did not understand that the order in which you do financial things matters as much as what you do. That timing within a decade of your life has compounding consequences that timing within a single year does not. That certain financial choices foreclose other financial choices in ways that are not visible at the moment of decision, but that become undeniable 10 years later. The first rule of the grammar, the one I wish someone had written on a wall somewhere I could see it every day in my 30s and 40s, is that financial outcomes are mostly the product of structure, not effort. This sounds almost offensive to people who have worked hard and tried to be responsible, and I want to be clear about what I mean. I am not saying effort does not matter. I am saying that effort applied without structure produces far less than effort applied within structure, and that the structure of a financial life, the automatic behaviors, the pre-committed decisions, the systems that operate without requiring willpower at every individual moment, determines the outcome more reliably than any amount of motivated activity in the absence of that structure. I spent the first 30 years of my financial life working hard within a structure I had never consciously designed. The structure existed. Habits form whether or not you form them intentionally. But it had been assembled by default, by convenience, by the accumulated weight of small decisions made in isolation without reference to any larger architecture. The savings that happened were the savings that happened to be easy. The expenses that persisted were the expenses that no one had ever specifically questioned. The financial instruments I held were the ones I had chosen at various moments in my past for reasons that made sense at the time and that I had never revisited to ask whether they still made sense now. I was working hard inside a structure that was underperforming against what the same effort, directed by an intentional design, would have produced. And the gap between those two trajectories, the one I was on and the one I could have been on, was not visible to me because I was looking at each individual piece of my financial life rather than at its overall architecture. The second rule of the grammar is one that sounds simple, and is actually one of the most consistently violated principles in personal finance, especially in the decades before retirement. The rule is this: money responds to consistency far more powerfully than it responds to intensity. Intense periods of saving followed by periods of spending the savings produce something, but they produce far less than the same total amount of money saved consistently and never touched. The mathematics of compound growth rewards patience and punishes interruption with a severity that is genuinely difficult to internalize until you have seen the numbers. A sum of money that compounds uninterrupted for 15 years produces something that a sum of money interrupted by withdrawals and recontributions over the same 15 years cannot replicate, even if the total amount contributed is identical. The interruptions are not neutral. They are expensive. Each interruption removes from the calculation not just the amount withdrawn, but all the future compounding that the withdrawn amount would have produced. At 50, I understood this intellectually. What I had not yet understood was the behavioral implication of it. That building a financial life around the principle of consistency requires making specific decisions in advance that make consistency automatic rather than dependent on willpower at every moment of pressure. It requires systems that protect the consistency from the entirely predictable circumstances that will arise, and that will provide entirely compelling short-term reasons to interrupt it. Building those systems at 50, rather than waiting for the right moment or the right level of financial stability that would make them feel comfortable, is one of the most valuable uses of the years between 50 and 60 that I can describe. The third rule of the grammar is the one that surprised me most when I finally understood it clearly, because it is the least financial sounding of the three, and the one with the largest financial consequences. The rule is this: your relationship with money is a reflection of your relationship with time. The people I have watched build the most durable financial security are not the people who were most motivated about money in an immediate sense. They are the people who had the clearest and most honest relationship with the future, who could feel the weight of decisions made today on the life they would be living in 15 years, who treated future versions of themselves as real and present, rather than as abstract beneficiaries of choices that felt distant. People who struggle financially almost always struggle with time in a specific way. The future feels less real than the present. Future needs feel less urgent than present desires, and the cost of delay feels theoretical rather than concrete. Learning to feel that cost concretely, to make the future financially real in a way that it competes effectively with the present, is not a matter of discipline or self-denial. It is a matter of imagination, of sitting regularly and honestly with the specific shape of what the future will look like, given the decisions being made now, rather than the comfortable abstraction of a future that will work itself out. At 50, this practice of honest future imagining is not comfortable. It shows you things you would rather not see. But it is the only thing that produces the clarity necessary to make decisions that your future self will not regret. What I wish I had known at 50 is that these three rules, structure over effort, consistency over intensity, future reality over future abstraction, are not things you learn by reading about money. They are things you learn by applying them, imperfectly, and with the inevitable course corrections that real application requires. The grammar of money is not a set of facts to be memorized. It is a set of habits of mind to be developed, tested, and refined over years of actual decision-making. And the earlier those habits of mind are developed, the longer they have to produce the outcomes that make the difference between a financial life that functions and a financial life that genuinely serves the person living it. At 50, you still have time to develop them. Not unlimited time. Every year from this point forward has more financial weight than the year before it, and the consequences of the decisions made in the next decade will be more visible and more lasting than the consequences of decisions made in any decade before it. But real time. Time in which the grammar once learned has years to operate. Time in which the structure once built has years to compound. Time in which the future, once made real, has years to become the present you actually inhabit. I am going to spend the next video going much deeper into something I touched on today, and that deserves far more than I have been able to give it here. The specific, practical process of designing the structure, of building the automatic financial architecture that makes consistency possible without requiring constant willpower. Because understanding the principle is the beginning. Knowing how to build the structure is the part that actually produces the outcome. And that conversation is one I have been waiting to have with you.